Scotland is enjoying a bit of a tourist boom at the moment, and visits from campervanners and motorhomers are on the rise. A number of folk have been in touch to ask me about Scotland's progressive access laws. To be more exact, where you can camp and where you can't camp in your campervan. It's almost become commonplace to hear folk expressing delight at heading north of the border where we can stop and camp wherever we like. Well, that's not quite true. Some online wild camping websites tend to perpetuate this myth, this assumption, but in reality things are not quite as simple as they appear. So what exactly is the legal situation in Scotland regarding spending a night in a campervan parked at the side of the road? Like many people, I use a campervan to take me to places where I can walk, where I can cycle, where I can paddle a canoe. I use the campervan for overnight accommodation, usually in an official campsite, whenever possible. But at those times of the year when campsites are shut or in places where there are no official sites, I'll spend the night parked in a lay-by or somewhere off the beaten track, out of sight. My campervan allows me to visit areas where I can walk or cycle without the need for carrying a tent with me. I don't dump waste or litter, and generally speaking, arrive at dusk and leave early in the morning. I kind of like to think of it as stealth camping. Incidentally, I also buy fuel locally, I buy food locally and provisions from local shops, and if I'm within walking distance of a pub that sells bar meals, so much the better. In short, I contribute to the local economy. I've been using campervans in Scotland for over 40 years. And I've never had a real problem when I've spent the night somewhere other than in an official campsite. However, it's clear that staying overnight in a camper or indeed in a car in a lay-by is not covered by the land reform legislation. Okay, so that's the bad news. How about some good news? I want to have a big shout out to a Yorkshireman by the name of Andy Strangeways. Several years ago, this guy, who travels extensively throughout Scotland for much of the time, became very frustrated by the number of no overnight parking signs he saw on Scottish lay-bys. Indeed, he became so annoyed he actively challenged Transport Scotland and Highland Council about these signs and indeed over the legality of the signs. And after prolonged discussion with Police Scotland, it became quite clear to Andy that these signs had absolutely no legal basis. So here is the legal situation in Scotland. Parking, whether on a road or up to 15 metres off the road, is lawful unless a traffic regulation order is in place and provided you don't do any damage. Black on yellow no parking overnight signs are not covered by a traffic regulation order. Now, it would appear that these non-prescribed signs such as these require special approval from Scottish ministers. But there's no record of any such authorised approval ever being given. An enforceable prohibition of parking would require an appropriate traffic regulation order with signs and lines that comply with the traffic sign regulations. But where they exist, there should be an explicit reference to the order itself. Now, eventually it was agreed that although the signs were erected with good intentions, I suppose, in an attempt to encourage responsible use of the lay-bys, the proper processes were not followed to prohibit overnight parking. Most of the no overnight parking signs have since been removed. Apart from these signs, campervanners and motorhomers have been historically tolerated in Scotland, and in many cases they've been positively welcomed. But in recent years, the burgeoning numbers of camper vans and in particular giant motorhomes has created a friction in many communities, and in particular in island communities where large, super large motorhomes take up considerable space on ferries to the exclusion of islanders travelling to and from the mainland. They may be going for hospital appointments or whatever. Basically, we have a lack of infrastructure for campervanners in the Highlands and Islands of Scotland. And this has led to many motorhomers and campervan owners parking in laybys and urban car parks and even on beaches or protected marker. And sadly, many of the owners have been quite irresponsible in the way they have disposed of rubbish and toilet waste. It's understandable then that this has led to a lot of local recriminations here and there, and the traditional tolerance and hospitality has been severely tested. Okay, here's one more point. While it's perfectly legal to spend a night in a lay-by on a public or even on a private road in Scotland or on the verge of such a road, it is not legal to set up an encampment, that's a semi-permanent campsite, as New Age travellers were wont to do a number of years ago. You know, camping in a lay-by or on a verge for several days or even weeks or even months at a time. My own advice as a campervan owner of some 40 odd years and as a long-time access campaigner is fairly simple. Use campsites where possible, and in areas where campsites are in short supply. Use laybys on public roads, but use them in a responsible way. And on single track roads, please don't park in passing places. You can park on the verge or other pulling off places, but try and avoid soft ground where you might do damage. And bear in mind that while it is perfectly legal to park in a lay-by or on a verge of a public road overnight, it's certainly not legal to dump waste or litter. And if possible, try and support local shops, restaurants, pubs, cafes, and the like. It's surprising how a meal in a local pub can put you in touch with local folk who will appreciate your contribution to the local economy. And above all else, enjoy your holiday in Scotland. It's undoubtedly one of the most beautiful countries in the entire world. And the old Gaelic Cuid Mille Fáilte, 100,000 welcomes, still holds true. Okay, so that's it. And please, if you've found this little video helpful, please click on that big red subscribe button. It'll be good to have you on board for the next videos that I do. So see you next time.